But would you consider opting out of the whole system under one condition? You pay 10% of your income, but you take care of yourself. Don't ask the government for anything.
That was Congressman Ron Paul at the big conservative conference last week. He joins us now. So you got a lot of applause for that line. What are you talking about? We'd opt out but pay a flat 10% tax. How would it work?
Well, you know, in a way, it was rather interesting that I got that kind of response. It was a rhetorical question in a way. My position is I don't like the income tax, but in a way, this is a compromise on the system as far as moving away from the system we have. And, you know, we've talked about opting out of the medical care system. I thought, well, why don't we opt out of more than the medical system? And I know that the people won't tolerate us who believe in liberty just to opt out and not pay anything. So I threw the 10% in. Let's just pay 10% to get the government off our backs. And it turned out to be a pretty popular suggestion. But then you couldn't take student loans, you wouldn't get medical care, you wouldn't get free education, you wouldn't get anything, but you would be left alone.
And I don't think you mean to say you wouldn't get medical care. You would get it, but you would pay for it yourself.
That's right. You wouldn't depend on the government. You wouldn't always say, oh, the government owes me medical care, they owe me an education, they owe me a job, they owe me a house, they owe me food stamps, on and on. This would dump all the responsibility back to the individual. So I was pleased that these young people were very responsive to it.
And the idea was well received at the conference because you went on then to win their presidential poll. Here are the results. You got 30%. Mitt Romney came in second with 23%. Everybody else got much less. So hardcore libertarians, some conservatives like you, but the media, not so much. Here's an article about your proposal entitled Ron Paul Pushes Financial Crack. 21-year-olds aren't responsible enough to opt out, this person says. What's your answer to that?
I would say, do they want to depend on the responsible people we have in Washington, the responsible monetary system, the responsible State Department, and our foreign policy that gets us involved? I would say there's a lot more responsibility outside of Washington. You know as well as anybody that people are more responsible when they're spending their own money, if we just allow them to keep it, than politicians are. They're totally irresponsible when they know they can resort to taxation and regulation and then printing up money. They're the ones who are totally irresponsible.
Here's another criticism from Joe Klein's blog. What if your business collapses, your spouse has a wasting chronic disease, and insurance companies in Ron Paul's radical free enterprise system refuse to cover? How do you survive?
I wonder how they survived before 1965 when the government started getting involved. This idea that if government doesn't do it, it won't work. They don't understand, they don't care, they reject the whole ideas of freedom. Freedom is much more successful. This idea that the government can do it and take care of it, it's a terrible idea. And the worst part, it depends on force. It always depends on the force of government to do this and that and redistribute wealth and tell you what you can do.
It's force that Joe Klein says we've consented to in the same blog. In our country, we have consented, the governed have consented to an old age pension plan, Social Security, consented to Medicare and Medicaid, consented to the FDA and EPA and IRS and SEC and OSHA. We've rejected your 10% offer. Your response?
Yeah, I didn't consent. I don't know if you've consented, but that really made my point, and maybe that's why that 10% offer just to get out of that system was so popular, because they haven't consented. They feel intimidated. They are forced into it, but it came to light with this last medical care bill. I don't think that was as dramatically different as some people suppose. You really, people don't like the mandate on Obamacare, but isn't there a mandate for Medicaid and Medicare? We pay Medicare taxes all the time. Even local governments like to tell you what you can eat and drink and how much salt you can use and the whole works. I mean, the mandates are too numerous. I'm for getting rid of the mandates, but with it comes responsibility.
Let's see if our audience agrees with you. And how many of you would opt out if you had the option? Pay 10%? Say about half, and most of you high school students are saying no to this. So who has questions? Yes.
Yes. How do you feel this would benefit high school students who's dependent on financial aid when they go into college?
Well, I didn't have financial aid when I was a high school student or when I was in college. The one thing is you would have jobs in a free society. Prices would be much lower. I only had to pay $300 a semester for my school. I could earn that money in summertime. It gave me self-respect. Somebody in high school thinking that I can't get anywhere unless the government takes care of me, that is so sad.
Yes, in the back.
What about the federal programs that you can't really opt out of, like the federal highway system?
The highway system could become a user fee system. Theoretically, that's what it's supposed to be. We pay a tax to drive on the highways, and those funds are supposed to come back and build our highways. But what happens is all those funds are spent in the general revenue, and then you have to get involved in politics to get some of your money back to build your highways.
And you wouldn't opt out of defense and the basic functions of government.
No, I think it's pretty clear in the Constitution, and that. But I'm sure that 10%, if we only had to pay 10%, you could have a very adequate defense. You couldn't have all the militarism and the occupations, but you could have an adequate defense. And you would have your courts, you would have the principle of private property, and contracts are very important, that they are enforced. So that is what you would pay for with your 10%.
Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if you have given thought to how this kind of a program could be administered. It sounds like opening up a whole new bureaucracy, possibly.
No, I think it would reduce the bureaucracy. All you have to do is sign a paper, I'm opting out. And then they don't qualify. You don't qualify, you can't go get food stamps. But you get to keep 90% of everything you earn the rest of your life. Wow.
Here's a question from my Facebook page. What gets covered under the 10% flat tax? Social Security, Medicare, no, but Amtrak,
No.
Post Office?
No. Oh, well, post office, that's probably still legitimate under the Constitution.
Somebody else
and that's a
asked,
shame because they're losing a lot of money.
just a last point from Facebook. Gil Victor says, if 10% is good enough for God, it ought to be good enough for government. Jessica Bell says, they don't deserve 10%. So, thank you,
that's
Dr.
That's why I had a qualifier in there. I don't want any income tax eventually.
Thank you, Dr. Ron Paul.
Thank you.